But it doesn't. It starts without function, without order. Darkness and sea are elements of chaos in the ancient world. And I'm using the word chaos very generally and generically there, not in the Greek term. Tohu, tohu vavohu are the two Hebrew words, formless and void, lacking worth or purpose, a place where nothing is done. It's a functionless state. Again, the Egyptian parallel, the non-existent, as a reference to that which has not yet been differentiated and assigned a function, yet has potentiality. And even in Genesis 1:2, we see that element of potentiality as the Spirit moves over the surface of the waters. So the text has this verb create, which has a functional aspect throughout the biblical text. It starts with with material already in place, but no functions. And then we have the big question, day one. Why didn't God just call the light light? But of course he doesn't. Verse 5 tells us, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called light. That gives us an idea of what it is that is really being created on day one. Because he names the light day. Light is not an object in the ancient world. Light has no material aspects in the ancient world. We argue whether it's particle and wave, but even we know that darkness is not an object, and that's named right alongside it here. So what is it that God called day? Again, if light is called light, and by the way, throughout the rest of the biblical text, it continues to be called light, not day, okay, then he's not talking about light. What is it that's named day? Well, any of you could think of this easily enough and given 2 minutes. It's not light itself, if we can talk about light itself, it's called day. It's a period of light, because of course that's what day is. So God called the period of light day, and the period of darkness he called night. Now that's not fooling around with the text. That's a typical mechanism called metonymy, where you can part for the whole and connected things. That's fine, okay? So God called the period of light day. Now that also helps us when we back up a verse to verse 4. God separated the light from the darkness. Of course, we're not talking about objects here that can be separated. Physicists know you can't separate those two things. We're not talking about physics here. God called the period of light day, and God called the period of darkness night, and the period of day period of light he called day, and the period of darkness he called night. Period of darkness, period of light. Everybody with me? Follow me from 5 to 4. And if you're shaking your head, I have you now in my grasp. Because we have to take that right back to verse 3. God said, let there be a period of light. If you've been following me here, your whole life just passed in front of your eyes, because we find that that's a very different statement. God said, let there be a period of light. So what in the world is God creating? Well, he named them day and night. Day one. God created the basis of time in the first step of bringing function and order to the cosmos. God has created time as a function. There's nothing material going on here. Now, we don't have the time to go through the entire sequence here, but let's take a look at day one is God creating time. Day two, God sets up what we call the firmament, or the expanse, separates the waters above, waters below. Those are standard ancient Near Eastern pictures. Waters above and waters below are in Egyptian, they're in Mesopotamian. We're not talking about modern cosmic geography here. We don't have to identify the waters above as the troposphere or the stratosphere or the clouds, or anything scientific at all. This is an ancient Near Eastern cosmology, and God is communicating using terms that they understand. Why in the world would God use modern scientific concepts to convey information to them? It's written to them, and it uses a framework that they understand, because he is not explaining cosmic geography to them. Now, if you have little doubts about that, again, let's look at a couple quick examples. Throughout the Bible, God talks to the Israelites, and this is God talking, and the Israelites believe this way too, about how they should think in their heart. And you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, and your soul, and your mind. That word for mind is the word for kidneys, intestines, your innards. Because in the ancient world, they believed that all the cognitive processes take place down here. I get smarter every year. Anyway, they believed that that's where it happened. God didn't say, and he didn't have to say, excuse me, you've got a brain, it's up here, it works this way. He did not have to change their understanding of physiology and anatomy. He used what they knew, what they understood, to communicate the important things. Because this isn't a lesson on physiology. And so God will talk about them thinking with their guts and with their heart. And that's not because God's naive, it's because he's communicating to them. And whatever you think with, by all means, have it be pure and focused on God. Just one example how God doesn't change the scientific shape of things in order to communicate to them. He uses what they know in order to communicate what he needs to communicate. There is not a single instance of God changing their science in the process of revelation. Not one. Every statement in the biblical text can be understood in their science. I know some people mention things like the circle of the earth. See? Isaiah 40:22. See, God was communicating to them that the earth was round. No, that's not the word for a sphere. It's the word for a disk. And everybody in the ancient world believed the world was a disk. You can find it in Akkadian literature. No problem. Now it's just a matter of logic to them. They looked all around a flat horizon and they didn't see any corners. So, of course, the horizon's round. And that's what the circle of the earth refers to. There's nothing in modern science here. God uses their own way of thinking. So he talks about the pillars of the earth. That's how they thought in the ancient world. He talks about the windows of heaven. That's how they thought in the ancient world. He talks about something solid holding up waters. Okay? This is the perspective that they have in the ancient world. Sometimes water comes down. That means it must be up there. If it's up there and doesn't come down all the time, something must be holding it up there. I mean, this is basic logic of observation, and God doesn't have to give them meteorology to explain everything. Because when God decided which science to use to convey the truth about himself and his world and his activities, he chose to use their science. Not ours. Why in the world should he choose to use ours? Next century, ours will be wrong too. And last century, they wouldn't have understood ours. What's God going to reveal himself every decade? It doesn't work that way. God used their science because he wasn't revealing science. So, in day 2, what God talks about is the weather. Because this is how weather works, as they understood it. It doesn't matter how it works. It doesn't matter how it works. What it matters is who makes it work. Functions. In day 3, it's vegetation, or more basically, food. Isn't it amazing? These things grow out of the earth, and then they drop seed, and same thing grows again. How cool is that? And we can eat this stuff. I mean, we've lost our wonder here. We don't see how amazing that is. God created this world to produce food. How neat is that? Now, you think of time, weather, and food, and you've just covered the dialogue at every bus stop in the world for all time. I mean, these are the things that we talk about. This is the stuff of life. This is the stuff we want to know that God's involved in. Forget black holes. This is what frames what life is. I challenge you to think of a function that's more important than these 3. God set it up to work. And it doesn't matter how you think it works, what structures, what material aspects you consider part of that. Yeah, whatever it is, God did it. By the way, I need to say that clearly. When I'm saying that Genesis 1 is an account of functional origins, that doesn't mean for a moment that I don't think God's responsible for material origins. Of course he is. But see, we're not asking just a general question, let's name everything that God did. We're trying to figure out what part of the story is Genesis 1 telling.